make sure that we both have these transactions. It's possible to look at a branch of your business and see now, I wouldn't have said this 2 years ago, but see enormous inefficiencies, an enormous amount of work that's going into things that might well in a short while be unnecessary. But we've got to get, just if I look internally, we've got to get our lawyers up to speed, our security people up to speed, our IT guys. We've got to have a much larger pool of folks capable in this technology. We've got to have our front office traders understanding exactly how this works, an entirely different dialogue with our lead underwriters. Who are they bringing to us? Are there other methods of us actually getting to borrowers, for example? So there are many more questions than answers, even in a relatively simple activity like issuing a bond. And that's why I'm not going to give you a date, but I do think it's moving fairly quickly. And the amount of energy and enthusiasm I see when I talk to folks that have grasped the technology, I think will bring it around fairly quickly.
So you didn't actually say a number.
That's right.
A number to wager?
I'd say in the next year. I mean, I
1 year. Wow.
I think it's like pretty now. I mean, the euphoria of what it's going to be like when it's all connected and working is years out. But I would say, I mean, it's in every discussion, at least at my company. It's coming up in a weekly conversation, which is to me now. So I don't know if you think different.
No, I don't think different. I think we're in it and starting at this point. I'm looking for some key use cases to be solved, and I think payments is obviously an easy use case to kind of tag onto. The other use cases I'm really excited about is identity. For us, I think blockchain and authentication of users is such a critical component. And I'll give credit to some of these groups working on this. So ID 2020 is a big initiative by the UN, which the mandate is to how do you get the billion-plus people around the world that actually don't have an ID, and they're literally looking at it and looking at blockchain as a way to solve for that, along with how to get them connected. I think identity along with payments is going to be a critical component in bridging those two things for scale. So hoping both progress at the same speed and one doesn't get left behind.
Interesting. Yeah, we're forgetting all the other exciting applications for blockchain, including one I like is they're recording diamonds on the blockchain. There's a company that's just doing that. There's more than 1 billion individual diamonds on a blockchain, and it expedites the clearing and eliminates the fraud and stuff like that. Is there any? And I like the bond one. I hadn't heard that before. That's really cool. Do you guys have any other blockchain sort of examples or use cases you're watching?
Yeah, it's trade finance is one in our area. So issuing the letters of credit. KYC, similar to authentication, but the exchanging of the documents with the banks. Those are the two big ones that we also see.
Let's throw it out to you guys one more. Does anyone have any blockchain questions or questions for Airbnb or the World Bank or GE? Sir?
You mentioned something about GE maybe use a token of some sort. Can you explain what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, so we joke about it, but it might be a reality at some point. So, just thinking about how our businesses exchange physical money. So, for our intercompany transactions, we're not only sending wires back and forth outside the U.S., but we're also paying the FX conversion fee on those payments. And that's a lot of money, right? And you go back to the conversation about people chasing. That's just, I call it wasted motion as a company to be chasing down a payment between entities. And even like one of our businesses does a lot of their own within business intercompany because of the complexity of all of our acquisitions and divestitures, right? So, we joke that maybe at some point we, instead of exchanging physical money, we use something like a GE coin and create that closed loop network where they could exchange that within themselves. And so, part of the complexity is that it has to be backed by a physical currency. So is there really a benefit of it? So, we talk about as the art of the possible, thinking about it a few years out. And then maybe we'll be actually doing something in the future with it. So.
Cool. Sir?
Yeah, right now the focus is, primarily building these applications on private blockchains. Do you see like a transition in the future to actually building a lot of this on public blockchains when there's more utility within these chains? I mean, you hear the argument the intranets versus the internet kind of thing. Do you see that playing out at all, or do you think it'll remain private and permissioned to certain participants?
I would. I don't think I have a good answer to that. I'm not quite sure how that will play out. There are problems of scale in certain areas, and you may need to compress who has access to a particular chain to allow transactions to move at a speed necessary for the business, for example. There may be other issues. I'm uncertain how it'll play out. I think it'll depend on the use, the number of participants that need to be in that mutual ecosystem with regard to a transaction. So it's uncertain to me.
I say similar. I mean, I think it's all about I don't know that it matters as long as we get the requirements, which are around like protecting it, making sure it's secure, making sure there's transparency. So I think whether that's public, private, as long as those requirements are there, I think we're semi-indifferent to it.
I think as more and more of these use cases are proven out, and people are going to start looking for some level of governance across connecting it to the public sector, right? Like having a public chain. I think that's the missing component. What kind of governance model can you put in on a public chain that everybody has to abide by? If you could think about like the Visa and MasterCard networks, they do a really good job of setting rules and holding people accountable for those rules, but also inviting people to participate. I think longer term, as you see a public blockchain emerge in certain sectors, you'll see rule books and governance around that as well.
Anyone else? If the room doesn't have any more questions, my final one to the panel is going to be, with so much going on, it's important to kind of read and watch and kind of get a guide from someone. In your case, can you name a person or a company you think everyone should keep their eye on for the future of fintech and blockchain?
Goodness, that's a tough one. To you.
Oh, man.
Or put another way, someone who inspires you in this area.
I'll give you
Okay,
one. I don't know the name. I won't say the name off the top of my head, but it's interesting. I'd say 6 months ago, I wasn't talking to fintechs at all. And in the last 6 months, I probably talked to them every week now, right? And I was talking to this lady who had started up a fintech focused on Africa. And just the creativity, the quickness, the thoughtfulness around how they're approaching a problem statement and the quick outcomes they're driving, I would say anybody like that as a leader, and I see this, without saying their name, as a company that's like a leader in the pack.
Is that BitPaysa by chance?
Possibly. And so, it's all about it's more about the approach. And when you see folks that have a real quick way to solve a problem and execute, I think that's going to be the key. So.
Okay, Paul?
Well, I would say what's inspiring is everybody that's involved in this new change. It's on companies like Ripple, they're hosting this event, and they're putting in a great deal of effort to develop new technologies that many of us may use in the future. It takes tremendous energy to push against the status quo and do new things. I think this is happening right across the space. I'm inspired that it might be too rich, but I'm somewhat inspired by the regulators with their light touch. We discussed that a little earlier, but it seems to me there's a very mature and decent thing going on right now. New technologies are being developed. People are putting enormous effort and energy into creating something new that might bring value to the entire globe. We care very much about financial inclusion and helping the poor, and we think these technologies are going to make a difference there. They're going to help us, I think, in the long run, improve the cost of our own internal administration, which is somewhat minor in comparison to the broader goals. But almost everybody that's involved is doing inspiring things, I think, here, and we should be all pleased about that. I think 5-10 years from now, we're going to see a different world. And that's a function of real work being done by real people, working enormously hard right now.
Yeah, I second that. There's just a lot of people pushing the agenda here.
Can you name one, though?
You know what? I'll talk about a politician, at least, you know, in a different way, and it's not Donald Trump. You know, I think Narendra Modi, if you look at his early days before he's rising up the political ladder in India, he was definitely against a centralized identity overall. And you know, when you see his rise to becoming prime minister, and he actually gets behind Aadhaar to actually, really from an inclusion perspective, for people that actually need services, what turned into a small use case to solve problem for financial inclusion turned into a major solution for identity that 1 billion plus people are now on. So I think, you know, I'm impressed by world leaders that are actually having the foresight and to change their mind when they see that there is something out there that could really help people and pushing the agenda on technology. So that's one area that I think the politicians and the world leaders are going to have an incredible obligation to not get in the way, but also be flexible in changing your mind, irrespective of what your prior viewpoints were.
Cool, a lot of optimism. I like it. So with that, let's give our panel a hand. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
You did well.
Huge thanks to Jeff for moderating. Kristen, Paul, Kapil, thank you very much. Another hand for our panel, please. Oh, watch out. You're good. So we are... we're very fortunate to have heard from the corporates, get them to share their real-life experiences. Obviously, it's a fast-changing world, a lot of complexities, a lot of friction. Really striking to me to hear some of the analogies. I think what struck me was with Kristen saying, if things could be more like Amazon, where you have that certainty and that transparency. So we've heard from the corporates. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from some banks that are leaning in, that are kind of taking the charge and trying to think through things differently. So please come join us in about half an hour. We'll be back on stage with another panel that is called Follow the Flows. See you in a little bit.